Some parents will sacrifice just about anything, or should I say, anyone, to keep their children happy. This week we discuss the Italian serial killer Leonarda Cianciulli. Let's open the serial killer file. Leonarda's exact date of birth is subject to debate. However, it's believed she was born sometime in 1893 or 1894 in Italy. Since the day she was born, Leonarda was disregarded, lacking any love or affection from her parents. Emilia, Leonarda's mother, showed much distaste towards her due to the fact that she was conceived from rape. During this time, a young woman in Emilia's situation would have never felt safe reporting something as severe as rape to the authorities. Because of this, Emilia would have been forever rejected by the village community, publicly shamed, her honor sacrificed, and with no other options to turn to, Emilia was forced to marry her rapist, Mariano Cianciulli, in order to raise the child she didn't want with the man she didn't love. Living in a poverty-stricken town, Leonarda's life was miserable and unstable, to say the least. The emotional neglect that Leonarda experienced at the hands of her mother led to not one, but two separate suicide attempts as a child. Wanting to take life into her own hands as a grown woman, Leonarda went on to marry Raffaele Pensardi in 1917, an older gentleman who worked as a registry office clerk in her town. This angered her parents, particularly her mother, as they had already planned and arranged who Leonarda was destined to marry. Leonarda had always been a superstitious woman and also believed in spells and magic. It was during this time that she had a strong belief that her own mother had placed a curse on the newlyweds, desiring nothing but negativity to enter their lives. Going against their wishes, Leonarda was no longer welcome to stay in the family home, leaving her no choice but to move to her husband's town in Lauria, Italy. The honeymoon didn't last long, as the law sought justice when Leonarda was charged for fraud and was sent to prison in 1927. Now feeling shameful in her husband's hometown, the couple moved once again, this time to the region of Lacedonia, as soon as Leonarda was released. Another move equated to a fresh start, and even with an optimistic attitude, things just didn't seem to quite work in Leonarda's favor. The feeling of being at peace at last was short-lived during this time in 1930. The couple had moved into a house when it unexpectedly was destroyed after a tragic 6.6 magnitude earthquake hit the entire region, killing over 1,400 people. Helpless, the two packed what little they could salvage and took to their final destination, the city of Correggio. Finally settled in, Leonarda was able to make a successful living owning her own little shop. Many in town knew her as a sweet lady, a kind neighbor, and a devoted mother. For once it felt as if the curse she believed in for so long was stripped away from their lives, or so it seemed. For Leonarda, pregnancy would prove to be not a blessing, but a devastating curse in her life. Grief had struck Leonarda. Though she became pregnant 17 different times, she miscarried 3 times and lost 10 additional children while they were young and vulnerable to many illnesses. With 4 remaining children to raise, Leonarda was incredibly protective of them, doing anything to keep them from harm's way. Out of the 4, Leonarda was extremely protective and loving towards her son, Giuseppe. He was considered to be her favorite child and adored him. Being a woman who fully believed in fortune-telling, Leonarda visited a woman who stated she was to have many children but would lose every single one of them before she died. Fear was instilled into her mind as she thought of losing the few surviving children she had. This fear took a drastic shift towards reality when in 1939 Italian men were being drafted to prepare for World War II, and with Leonarda's luck, Giuseppe happened to be one out of the many young men who were chosen to leave his town and fight. As a tremendously loving mother, Leonarda knew very well what she was going to do to protect her son Giuseppe from dying. She would sacrifice another human to take his place in the afterlife. With the desire to uncover more in her life, Leonarda sought the help of another fortune teller. This time, the fortune teller who practiced palm reading stated, "In your right hand I see prison, in your left a criminal asylum." Regardless of her reading, Leonarda put her son before her foretold future and carried out a deviated plan in hopes to keep him alive. Working part-time as a fortune teller herself, Leonarda found her sacrifices in middle-aged women who were vulnerable and hopeless. Her first victim, Faustina Setti, was unmarried and unhappy with her love life. Leonarda then told her victim of a suitable man she would marry in the town of Pola. Leonarda then instructed the woman not to tell a single person of her departure and to write out postcards to every friend and family member, letting them know that everything in her life was going very well. Ecstatic, the woman jumped to the good news and packed for her anxious, long-awaited trip to meet her future husband. Unfortunately, Faustina would never live to see this day. Eternally grateful for the good news, Faustina made one last trip to Leonarda's house to say goodbye. Upon entering Leonarda's house for one last thank you and a goodbye, Leonarda offered Faustina a glass of wine. Faustina obliged and happily drank the glass given to her. What she didn't realize was that the good fortune teller that she had trusted all along had placed drugs inside of her drink, knocking Faustina unconscious in minutes. With time ticking, Leonarda took advantage of what was presented to her and immediately killed Faustina with an axe, dragged the body into a closet, and later chopped the body up into 9 individual pieces. Blood from the victim was then entirely drained into a basin in order to make disposal much faster and easier. Leonarda went on to state in her official memoirs, "I threw the pieces into a pot, added 7 kilos of caustic soda, which I had bought to make soap, and stirred the whole mixture until the pieces dissolved in a thick, dark mush that I poured into several buckets and emptied in a nearby septic tank. As for the blood in the basin, I waited until it coagulated, dried it in the oven, ground it and mixed it with flour, sugar, chocolate, milk, and eggs, as well as a bit of margarine. Kneading all the ingredients together, I made lots of crunchy tea cakes and served them to the ladies who came to visit, though Giuseppe and I also ate them." Leonarda was able to receive a good amount's worth of Faustina's life savings for the services that she had provided her prior to her sudden death. One human sacrifice was good, however, it wasn't guaranteed in Leonarda's mind, so she believed she just had to keep going. The second woman to seek out Leonarda was Francesca Soavi, a woman who was in search for employment. Unable to find the job she desired in her town, Leonarda instructed her to travel to Piacenza, as she was more than certain that a teaching job was awaiting the woman there. Once again, Leonarda prohibited the woman from telling anyone about her whereabouts and insisted that the woman mail everyone letters in hopes that family and friends heard from her. Continuing the same pattern, Leonarda drugged and killed Francesca on September 5th, 1940. Being no different than the previous victim, Francesca's body was boiled and remade into homemade bars of soap and tea cakes, which Leonarda happily shared with the neighbors, keeping up her positive reputation and distracting the community from the disappearances. Reports stated that Leonarda also collected money from this victim for her services as well. A third woman, Virginia Cacioppo, a talented former soprano that once performed to many in the La Scala Theater, came to Leonarda in hopes of finding future employment opportunities. Leonarda enthusiastically informed Virginia of a factory job that was calling for her in Florence, instructing the woman to do as she told her previous victims. The woman packed, sent out her letters, and was sure to visit one more time before leaving town. On September 30th of that same year, Leonarda drugged and murdered Virginia in the same fashion as the other women. Because of her gracious fortunes, Leonarda was rewarded with money and jewels prior to the murder of her third victim. Leonarda became quick and efficient at her work, making her a pro in her craft. In her memoir, Leonarda included that she particularly enjoyed consuming her third victim, going so far as to go into great detail of the taste of the woman, saying she ended up in the pot like the other two. Her flesh was fat and white. When it had melted, I added a bottle of cologne, and after a long time on the boil, I was able to make some most acceptable creamy soap. I gave bars to neighbors and acquaintances. The cakes, too, were better. The woman was really sweet. Questions began to arise in the town. Virginia's sister-in-law was particularly worried and needed answers as to where she was. Growing suspicious, the sister-in-law asked around and was told that Virginia was last spotted entering the house of Leonarda. Fearing the worst, she told authorities and immediately reached out to the superintendent of police. An investigation took place, and in no time, police arrested Leonarda. Once in custody, Leonarda was quick to confess her murders, once discovering that police had also arrested her son Giuseppe as a possible accomplice. Leonarda was tried for murder in 1946. Because of the unusual circumstances of the case, many flocked to watch the trial unravel in court. Calm and collected while on the stand, it seemed that Leonarda was not fazed in the least by her brutal acts. Just as the fortune teller had foretold, Leonarda was found guilty of her crimes and sentenced to 30 years in prison and 3 years in a criminal asylum. While admitted to the asylum, Leonarda made an official memoir titled An Embittered Soul's Confession. Leonarda Cianciulli passed away on October 15, 1970 from cerebral apoplexy at the age of 76. Many of the tools Leonarda used to murder, dismember, and cook her victims are now displayed at the Criminological Museum in Rome. That's all for this episode. Thank you for watching. If you'd like to learn more dark and disturbing topics, please be sure to subscribe to my channel now, and I will see you next Sunday.